landscape and seascape painter who finds inspiration painting from the natural world. Her process includes working on location as well as studio work, which employs visual memory and imagination. Jackie's artistic journey began at age 12 when she studied with Joseph Gianfrido in Gilead, Connecticut. A former student of Guy Wiggins and James Goodwin Manis, Gianfrido instilled in her a love of traditional oil painting. She earned a degree in graphic design from the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale and a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in painting from the Lime Academy College of Fine Arts. Her love of travel and creating on location takes her to many places, in the U.S. and abroad. She has participated in the Telluride Plein Air, Painters on Location in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Hudson Valley Plein Air. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including first prize for outstanding work at the Salmagundi Club in New York City. Her work has also been acquired by the Brinton Museum in Bighorn, Wyoming. Jackie teaches painting at the Lime Art Association. Her professional memberships include the American Women Artists, American Society of Marine Artists Signature Member, North Shore Art Association, Oil Painters of America, Catherine Lorillard Wolf Art Club, Rockport Art Association, and the Salmagundi Club in New York City. She's represented by Bayview Gallery in Brunswick, Maine, the gallery at, is it Somes Sound?
Mm-hmm.
In
Mount Desert,
Maine, and Folly Cove Fine Art in Rockport, Mass. So you can view her work online, www.jacquelinejones.com, and you'd like to welcome Jacqueline.
Well, thank you so very much, all of you, for coming out. And I know Jane Zisk from Connecticut Plein Air
A long time ago.
Painters Society.
When I
She
first
was the
started the
ex-president.
group.
So she got me going out painting plein air many moons ago. So anyhow, you've heard my journey quite a bit, and so now I'm just running from place to drop work, pick up work, and running like crazy, going here and there. So I won't take up too much time. My painting here, I'm just going to go through the materials list. I'm not going to go through color by color. You guys can take those and pass them around. I'll just take one. Because I'll be going through that as I'm painting. I can name them. In fact, I will lift these up. People always like to know what colors you use. I use a very limited palette. So it's basically a warm and a cool of each primary, with a few exceptions. So these are the exceptions down here. This is raw sienna, and this is yellow ochre. So that's basically an earth yellow. Right, it's already got some green and some red mixed in there. I could whip that up myself if I wanted to, but it's cheap, you just buy it, you know. But the difference with raw sienna is that it's transparent, it's very transparent. So I like to tone my seascapes with raw sienna on sunny days. On gray days I could go purple or green or something more gloomy or more complementary. But on a sunny day painting I tend to go with that. The reason why I like to have that show through the surface. It also helps that archival gets a layer of paint on there. Okay, so the cool yellow, warm yellow, so cadmium red light or lemon, cadmium deep, cadmium red light. This is, shouldn't be on here for this, but this is cadmium red deep or medium or something. Alizarin crimson. And then the purple I mix with these two, which is ultramarine blue. Usually I like deep, but I ran out, so this is just regular ultramarine blue. So these two, about half and half to an eggplant purple. You can make one that's a little more alizarin-y, you know, red, and a little more blue. You can do two if you prefer. And then that would go to ultramarine blue. Cobalt is, I think it's on my list as an option. And cerulean blue. You can make this with half viridian green, half ultramarine blue, and then a quarter of that volume in white, and you whip it up to about value number 7, which is right about here. So it's a nice dark color. Let's see here. What is that guy? Oh, I know. I just bought this the other day. It's a little cheap color. It's phthalo turquoise, so it's a screamer. But if you really want to get a blue-green fast without having to add a ton of Viridian and a ton of blue,
Yeah.
you know, because these are very wimpy colors, so this packs a lot of punch, but you have to be careful with it, which you'll see it might scream tonight, we don't know. And then Viridian green. My whites, generally titanium white, sometimes a mixture of zinc titanium. That one is a little more translucent, so when you want to get to some of the waves sparkle, the zinc is kind of nice. I don't have that tonight, but that's okay. This I don't think is on my list, but it's a warm white. And again, you could take a little chunk of that, and you could take a little warm yellow, and you can make your warm white. But I just buy it. It's just so easy. This is actually left over from another painting. It's titanium buff. I probably won't even use it tonight, so. There's a couple strays on the palette that's not on the list. So how many oil painters do we have here? Yeah, so there's about half in the room, or close to that. Cool. Seascape painters? Yeah.
Tried.
Awesome. So I know I've talked to some of you who do pastel and acrylic. Okay, so this palette I usually use at home for larger scale paintings, and it's an old poster board. Remember those? You just take off the little brackets, and it comes with this plastic on the top. You shove a poster in between, and then remember those little plastic strips that clip on?
Oh, yeah.
So I just take the plastic strips off and then put tape on the edge. And it's really good for demos like this too. I can carry it around and, you know. But for a smaller painting, I'll just use this Masterson palette, the little teeny 12-16 box. Okay, that's Gamsol, so it's odorless mineral spirit, and that is the least evaporation rate to the air. Those are the things that are troublesome when you're oil painting in an enclosed space. When you're plein air, you don't have to worry except for getting it on your skin. But the vapors at home, I have a nice filter with charcoal filtering system in my studio. And then the real horrible thing is the liquid. That's pretty bad, smelling wise, and not good to use on a daily basis. But again, you know, outside you're fine. All right, so I usually start, I tone it with raw sienna, and then some of you probably saw me take this rag and then really dry it off, right? Because I want it dry. I don't want that picking up into the first layer of paint and being too wet. So it's really just a tone. This little rag, I call it my magic eraser. So if I just took a mark and plopped it on here, you just erase it right off because it has that tone on it still. Because if you took a plain one and dipped it in turp, it'd be all white. So that's my little magic eraser thing. So as far as when I started painting, I always think of the tic-tac-toe grid that's in your camera, right? That's the easiest way. You don't have to do that Fibonacci thing and all that, drawing the diagonal and dropping the right angle.
Yeah.
No, never again. So like these key points, I always think of, I would say Gladys Knight in the Pips. So you have to have a main star. So for me, this is going to be my Gladys, right? I just really am interested in this cave going into the barrel and these little threads, lacings going up into the barrel there. That would be like a second pip, and then probably in other spots I'll show a little interest, like the water break between this blue section and this white foam. That's a good spot to put that right on that 2/3, right? So this is going to have this barrel going in, right? And then the big danger on this is you're halfway. So whenever I put my canvas onto an easel, this tells me it's half, this little metal thing in the middle, right? So it's kind of like that bullseye, somewhere around there, maybe it's down there, but you want to stay away from putting something dead center, unless you balance it well. You can always do that too. So, I like to just start out drawing, and I take just the Gamsol, and I'm just using the consistency of I guess it's sort of like a cooking oil or something like that, not too thin. So I'll just start with this first line. Oops, and this guy's actually over here more. So, and then the wave kind of plunges down. And then, what I notice with waves, if you have an arc, then there's usually another one coming over and arcing, and then there's another one arcing from that, and then another one arcing. And the wave arcs are perspectival. So this wave right here, if you think of it as a crescendo, like this the diminuendo and this the crescendo end, this would be much wider over here, and then it goes down, 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 perspective. So your eye level is where the horizon line is, and yes?
So is that a Photoshop, or did you actually find out that as a wave?
That's from Westerly. I found the wave.
All right.
Yeah, and then I just go to CBS and I put two together for demos that, I usually don't do that in my studio, but I used to waste a lot of money with printing photographs to paint from, but I don't bother so much anymore. I'll use a study, or I'll use an image and then do a small study from the photograph, and then that would just be a launching off point. Completely different colors, completely different composition than the photo. So these waves, these lines here will come straighter, and then they'll start to go uphill a little more, and then here they start to flatten out a little more this way, like they fan up. Because everything kind of goes up towards the horizon line, which is somewhere up here. I have to watch out for the halfway mark here. I don't want to put the bottom of this wave on the halfway, right? Because that's a faux pas. So you just, roughly, I'm just going to kind of make that line. I start off pretty sloppy. I don't, and I really like to have my students not, transfer drawings on the canvas. There's no need to do that, because, it's your piece of artwork, and you can figure it out pretty good with the drawings. Get it in the ballpark. There's this little wave that comes almost up to the top there. It goes like right into here. This is a strange little shape. Let me mix up a little bit more of this color. Whatever color I tone the canvas with, I kind of just draw with something like it a little bit darker, Okay, and there's like a little lip up here. This one goes down, and this one goes up, and then down, and then up, and then down. And then they all just kind of shoot. They start to rise up again, so there's like a little sway back there, and they all start to rise up again that way. So here is that little tick mark of the third, so I might as well connect the dots there, right? I like that there's more space here from this line to the top edge of the picture plane, and here there's less, right? Because you want your compositions to have opposites. If it was even, it's a boring painting, so composition rather. Okay, so from here, I know a lot of painters will come in with their painting already drawn in, but I kind of like to stress that you really don't have to be that careful. Just, generally. This is like a trapezoidal shape here. It's a little odd. And then there's all these lacings that go down, and I'll just kind of draw a few. And those two, these are higher up the barrel, then they start to lay down. So then they start to go more this way, and then more this way. How many of you start off a painting like this, kind of loose? Yay! I love it. It's freeing, it's the fun part of the painting to me is the blocking. Okay, so these what do you call these guys here, the splash, the foam. It goes downhill and it gets smaller, you know, right down. So it's wider up here and then it gets smaller because you have to think of that perspective. And then there's a bunch of this white that will connect all the way up into this area. And this will overlap. Overlap is a way that you can get depth. So this foam is in front of this barrel, so it's in front of it, so then this line will be up higher. This is on a slight angle this way. So, let's see, right about here, actually, I just have to remember that's kind of angled. Let me just check my middle. Okay, yeah, the center is more down here somewhere, so I'm not gonna worry about that mark. All right, so this is just a little bit of water spilling over. The wave is going to start. With a wave, if you're thinking about waves in an ocean, like portraits of waves, you think of past, present, and future with a wave. So let's see, over here, this is all about to happen, and this is present, this is past, and this is future. So you think about that process of the wave, you know, because you can see that this barrel is getting ready to roll again right over here, but it just hasn't caught up. So off the picture plane is past, that's already broke down there, and over here, oh wait, that's future, that's past. Sorry about that. I do that quite a bit. Okay, then for the rest of the composition, there's a few small things. You can't see it in this photo, but right here there's a crest of a wave that's a triangle shape. So it's going down, down, down like that. So that leaves this little shape a triangle, right? And so then I broke the composition up here. This is sort of a little triangle, you know, and then here you can see the blue pattern here, that's also a little triangle. Repeating shapes, even though they're subliminal, they can help cement a design. So this foam pattern, you know, just, it kind of sways into here. And then this, oops, this goes up into here. So then, you know, this shape is going to be smaller than the sky. You know, that's not sky, it's actually ocean. So, you know, I'd like to have those differences if I can have that. So maybe this one could be the largest. Yeah, so this one is slightly bigger than that one. I could always build this up a little bit more and make less of that. Okay, so the only other notes that I'm going to do here are, there's these little, they're almost like steps going through, which is the sand at the bottom. You know, the waves are breaking apart, so there's 1, 2, 3. And I think of those as steps taking you through the painting. So this is a Z composition, right? So your eye comes in here, and then it Z's back this way, and then this way, and then up that wave, and then there's this back breaker up in here. At least that's the way I had it in my mind. You know, sometimes you can completely obliterate a plan, but it's nice to be able to, you know, have some sort of, you can have sparkles lead you through that Z pattern, different things like that. Okay, so those little shapes of sand, there's one here, there's one overlapping in the back, and then this guy's kind of over there, something, maybe not up that high, but that's good. Okay, and as I was talking about that big triangle, so right up here, so now the sky, or the ocean, is again broken up in more shapes, so that's more interesting, and then this will come forward more. Okay, so I go darks to lights, so I'll go with this big brush, and I'm gonna mix up, let's see, I'll take some ultramarine blue. You know, for this, the purple that's underneath there, I'd like to have a nice dark blue. The opposite of blue on the color wheel is like a red. So that will desaturate that red. So that's the purple. And it could be too dark. We'll see. I think I'll add just a little bit of green in it. Actually, the phthalo one is a little more, okay, start with bigger brushes when you're working with bigger shapes, and it's the consistency of like a cooking oil. If you put too much turpentine in at this stage, you break the binder down of your paint, and it's not even doing its job anymore. So you want to have that where it's not too thick. It has to be like a cooking oil consistency. And then when I have that cooking oil consistency, I like to spread it so it's not on here soaking wet. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'll overpaint my shapes, because I can go in here and I can lay these cerulean blues and things that are threading through. Heck, I might as well just cover that whole thing. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to play with the transparency in my oils. So you can see the streaks of the brush. You know, sometimes you obliterate that when you're working with it, but if you can keep some of that. So you can see it's sort of a triangle, like it would get smaller if this continued, and then here it would get wider, probably. The block-ins are fun. It's a fun stage of the painting, because you can, you know, I've got this in my way, but you, and then this, if I really wail on it, it's probably gonna fall over, so I have to be a little careful here. But if you're in your studio, this is a fun part of it. It's when you're putting on those details at the end that you can sometimes, you know, struggle with, oh, what should I put here? Okay, so that's that dark. And then behind it, so I'm gonna add ceruleans into there. So when you have a warmer color, cools recede and warms come forward, right? So this follows the color wheel, right? So right here is the color wheel. So when you paint, just think of the color spectrum, and you really can't go too wrong. So you can see, you know, yellow, and then it gets into red, and then it gets into alizarin, and the purple, and the blue, and then see the blue greens, and then the green, and then you return to yellow again, right? So that's why the cool yellow is cool, because it has green in it. It's transparent and it has green in it. Where the warm yellow is closer to red, it's got more red in it. So there's two ways to lighten a color. Do you know what those are? Obviously, white and yellow. And this lemon yellow is so wimpy that you can kick the heat back into, you know, usually white and yellow. But if you just use white alone, your paintings will look too clinical. You know, they'll look too cold. So you really want to have warmth in it. You can, you know, heat them up with red too. Whoops. Okay, so. Sorry. The first color I added. I added a little red to it, but this one I'm going to add alizarin instead, which is that winey color, and then just a little bit more of that green. So, actually, it should be a little lighter, and just get a couple real dark. Sometimes those passages, it gets too sheer, right? So. You know, just make sure you have some good strong darks, so when we go in with the other color. All right, so the sun is up here, so you always want to think of where the sun is. You can see it on the sparkle up into the top of here, and this right here is a triangle shape that's kind of facing that way. The shadows on that side, and in here the shadows are over here. So in the way back, we're just going to add just a little bit of white. So I took just a little bit of white. So this could be the color in the background, you know, the upper. Because what happens is when the wave starts to rise up like this, its back is to the sun, right? So it's going to be pretty dark. Though, as it starts to flatten out, then you're going to pick up the sky color, you know, the ceruleans in the sky if it's a sunny day. But back here, it's going to be more of that cerulean blue, in this case at least. So let's see if I can get this color where I want it. I'll add just a nick of the cool yellow. So how are we doing for time? How much time, can someone give me a halfway mark when we're on the halfway? So I am 15 minutes in or so. Yeah, we have time. Yeah. Oh, this is fun. When you've got a loaded brush like this, you know, you can actually, you know, physically push it into the canvas, like really hard. You know, take out all your frustrations. And I always have to end up mixing up more in this stage. I used up all of that green already. So I'll just grab a little more ultramarine blue, and then it was a little cerulean, and then a little of the yellow. I'll mix up a lot more this time. And even ochre, that's just an earth yellow. So as it comes closer to the sun, right, if the sun's up here, I can get this a little warmer. So it's nice to have a transition on this side and this side, cooler or warmer. So let's see if I can get it there. Just a little bit of white. See what happens with this. So yeah, it's really fun. You're just using the Gamsol, the turpentine at this point, right? There's no medium of any kind. So it's nice and thin, and look how different that green is. And just kind of go up and down like the ocean would go. There'll be little sparkles up in, I'll just leave a little bit of that yellow to indicate that there's a few riding up on that crest. So now that I'm going back to that bluer side, I have to wipe my brush. So instead of dirtying up the Turk can, because that's a real pain to change. That's the one thing we hate as oil painters. It gets gunk at the bottom like sludge. So, you know, I just like to dip it in instead of shaking it and then taking most of it out in the rag. And, you know, that's sufficient enough. And so I'm just going back to that bluer side. And I think I had a little purple in there. Oops. Need a little more green. That's where that phthalo turquoise comes in handy, because the Viridian, it just won't do anything to change your color. And you can really get a quick punch with the phthalos. I took a class from Catherine Simmons years ago, and I was using manganese blue. And that's another invasive color. And boy, did I paint some screamers back then. But, you know, you could say I like to push color. Okay, so then you just look around your painting and say, what's the next color squinting? So it could be like underneath the seafoam, this blue, these colors, they're all kind of around the same. I would say that's the next dark. So under the barrel here, as it is in the shadow at the bottom, it's usually the darkest, and it kind of goes in a band. you know, then as you get up to this band, it gets a little bit lighter, and then lighter and lighter as you come up. Right, so we'll just start with a gray-green. So I'll just wipe this off here. So the opposite on the color wheel, that's how you get your, that's how you desaturate a color. Right, so viridian and red, they're opposites on the color wheel, like this. Right, so if I want to get a green and I want to gray it out a little, I just take a little bit of the red, and that will gray it out, so it's not so bright. If you get it where you can make it so it's neither red nor green, you can get beautiful brown. So you can mix all of these are all from complementary pairs, yellow-purple, and I do a lot of my sand on the beach with the yellow-purple combo, right? So I make a brown, and then you just add white or yellow to it, depending on the shade. So that's that. All right, so that means that I could start with viridian green, and then a little bit of the red's highly invasive too, so you gotta beware of that one. I would imagine the acrylic painters who deal with the same thing, right? So let's see. All right, that I think I like over here. All right, then it gets really, really dark. So I added a little bit of that phthalo turquoise to the red and green batch that I just made. I can add a nick of purple to that to get the value darker. So purple and green, see, it's mixing with the yellow tone on the back of the canvas, so it means I have to add a little bit more purple to that to overcome that. It's still pretty yellow, man. Stubborn. So I know that some of these lacings are going to lace through, but I'd rather paint under first, and then I can always wipe out a trail with a rag, right? But it's kind of good to have this underneath. When it hits in this spot, the sand from the bottom of the ocean floor, it starts to kick in, and then some of these reflections are going here. So it's much warmer there. So then, wipe the brush. I have a nice, what do they call this stuff, art guard on my hands. I used to wear gloves all the time, but it works pretty good. So if you see me getting paint on me, I should be protected, okay? Okay, so that nice color down there, it's, you know, the viridian green, then probably a little alizarin crimson, then a little bit of ochre, back to alizarin. Maybe a little more yellow. I can tell once I get it. So you see I'm trying to get like a winey color red, but it's also got green in it. So it's very tricky because if you go too far, you completely neutralize it and you'll have like a brown. So I just want to see how this is going to react with the yellow that's underneath, if it's close to what I'm looking for. That's good. So it's nice and warm on the bottom. And it's all these little color shifts that make the difference, you know, in a painting. Okay, and then I want to use a little bit of that in this area. So I'm just going to add a little bit of white to that same batch. Whenever you add white to a color, you know, it cools it off pretty quickly. So you just need to kick the heat back in. So I need to get the value lighter, so I add the white, but then I have to get the heat back in, so I'll try a little, whoops, and that darn alizarin is super invasive, so we'll try again. I'll go back with the white. And then back with the ochre. That might do it. So I keep dipping in the turp when you see me going over that direction. And I'm getting at that consistency of the cooking oil. So, yeah, this is really nice. So it's like this mauve, especially right up against the wave in here. So it's, when you squint your eyes, there's only like a half of a value step from this green to this mauve color. It gets much lighter as it gets away from the wave shape, but it's nice to abut two shapes close to the same value, different color, right? Because then it doesn't look like a jigsaw puzzle because the values are close to each other. So I could just take this and just kind of wing it in there all the way across. And the farther away that it gets, we're going to cool it down with purples, right? Because this has like a lot of taupe in it. All right, so the purple, I could take the alizarin crimson and a little bit of purple and white and see what happens. Not a whole heck of a lot. Let's go a little lighter and do that again. Bless you. All right, let's try that. That little stinker. All right, so I went really white, really purple, a lot more white, and then a little bit of green, because green is the opposite of that alizarin crimson. It looks like a purple, like a wine color, but it's really your cool red. So we'll see if this is going to be a little more cooler. Because when things get farther away from you, they get cooler, sometimes lighter. It's not a little bit more alizarin in there. Okay, so that's pretty nice. Then that can go in front of here. So you see how you have a transition? Here it's a little bluer, here it's a little greener. It's not a huge difference, it's just a little color shift, that's all. And then here, warmer and cooler, so you have those color shifts. Here it starts to get dark and muddy and gray, so I'm going to go back into just one of those mauve-y colors. So, you know, to make like a brown, it's the opposites on the color wheel, any of these, purple and yellow. So I'll take a little hit of purple. Ochre always works nice. Okay, so back to, no, we want that a little cooler, so I'm adding a little blue to that. That will darken it and cool it off. That's good right there. There's some wave that's going to break over that. On top of this dark strip on this side, there's some green. So again, it's that banding. We're down where it's away from the light, it's darker, and then it gets lighter and lighter as it goes up towards the light. So we're going to have to go back to Viridian green. And we can take the opposite on the color wheel. I could go with alizarin crimson, that's the cool red. It's almost too neutral. Try some of that phthalo to give it a little life. That's a little better. And spreading it out, you can see the color more. And so then you can kind of just go up and down if you want to gently break those bands into each other like that. Okay, so next colors, I think I'll do the inside of that cave there. So we'll go with some blue greens, and a little bit of white. Hope I'm not blocking you guys. So see this nice, this is a little oversaturated, but sometimes I like to start more saturated. So you know what I mean when I say saturated, that's like straight out of the tube without adding opposite of the color wheel to it. But, because it's almost easier to get these sheer transparent colors like stained glass window, it feels more like water. And then later if you want to nick them down, you can drag other colors over them later. So then as we go up, it starts to neutralize, it's a strange color, it's this mauvey gray. I think I'll add just a little bit more of this in here. Oops, go around. So again, that mauve that I was just trying to get, I might be able to utilize that after all, as long as it's light enough. I want it just a little more red. Kind of shake it in there. It starts to get all aerated up in there, and a lot of times I have to go back and build a dark, which I kind of want to go right into this area that's a little too light in that spot, so it's always going back and forth. So I'm taking that phthalo turquoise. Let's see. That's kind of nice. I like that. And then I have to gently. So I use almost watercolor techniques when I do the beginnings of my oils. So you can see I'm just kind of blending colors together, right? And it's still very thin. So I like to get the thick paint on later, but I like it to have the feel of water, so it's got transparency. And you know, you just keep playing with it because you don't want to pull too much off. So it's kind of you kind of have to just keep fudging with it until it works pretty much. All right, so I'm going to start with like this pretty blue that's going through here. There's a lot of grays that are on top of that plane, but these blues are going to be bluer in the back, and then as they come forward, they're going to get green. So you can see some of these greens running through here. These greens and those greens, and here it's even purple, and then it's got some blue through it. All right, let's see. Got to really wash my brush for that one. There's phthalo turquoise on there. A lot of times I like to just wipe the palette or it gets crazy. Okay, ultramarine blue. And a lot of times I'll make puddles with a palette knife, and I call it my mother puddle, and I have a really, for a big painting like this, I'll put $half size big mother puddle, and then one side I'll add light to it going towards the sun, and the other side I'll put more cool colors towards the shade. And then there's little rabbits around that big mother puddle. That's, a lot of times I'll just stack all those colors I see, out so that I can just go. But here, I like to kind of just mix as I go. So ultramarine blue, And then we'll just add white, and I know I have to add other things or it's gonna be too intense, right? So we're looking for that value. So, you know, the ways that you find a color, it's hue, value, and intensity. You know, hue is another word for color. So if I'm gonna try to make a blue, well, I'm gonna start with the blue, and then I'm gonna add white until I get at the value that I'm looking for, right? So I just kind of creep up on that value. Sometimes you can't tell until you put it down and it's too dark, but you do a stab at it. This is probably a number 5 value-wise, so you can kind of see I'm darker than a 5, and I might be too dark, but okay, so now I have this blue. It's going to be really intense, and if I put it on the yellow, it's going to turn green. So we'll put just a nick of the opposite on the color wheel. I'll take a little bit of red. Maybe back a little more blue, because that red is really crazy. All right, so we'll just test this one and see if this one is going to do it or not. So I start to paint what's underneath, and then the foam comes on top later. Okay, so that's too dark. I think I'll add a little bit of green because it just looks a little too cool. A little more white. Because remember, things in the background are going to be just a little bit lighter, and they'll have more blue in them. I found a trick is when you tone your canvas, a lot of times if I can't get a color, if I add a little bit of the raw sienna, which is what I toned it with, to your mixture, then it's going to work well. A little more green. Hope I'm not flicking it on the walls. So I overpaint the shapes. Okay, so now we can start coming with more green. So I'll just add yellow light. Yeah, that's a nice green right there. You know, if you want to gray it out too, you can just add a little bit more of the opposite. And then of course I went a little too much, so I'll go back it up again. You'd think I would learn, but I don't. So I just kind of wanted it slightly more gray. So this is a little more neutral. If you have everything singing with color, you might, it's just too boring. There's got to be some subdued areas in the painting. Boy, it's fun to take a big brush and just cover that up. So now it's kind of interesting. In the front, there's a lot of browns that are showing through the surf as it's rolling in. So I'm going to take a little red, which is the light red, opposite green. All right, so that took this really bright red and it made it quite dark. So yellow ochre, because we're wanting more of a brown. Okay, a little more green because we don't want it that screaming. And I'll see if that's not too dark. It might be way, way too dark, but back to the turp. could put some greens on top of that too. Right, so you have like sand underneath as it gets closer and more shallow. Just in that area. Then those steps, right, there were 3 steps.
Jackie, we're getting close to your halfway.
Oh, okay.
I've been told.
Oh, sure, that's great, so that means I have a half an hour left?
45.
45?
Ish,
All right,
give or take.
yeah, that sounds good.
You can stay longer if you want.
I know a lot of places, they start locking up the building and I'm like cleaning up in a hurry and it's a little traumatic.
We won't do that.
So just overpaint these things, right, because you can put all kinds of seafoam on top. I like to jump around, so I'm going to go up in here and put some of those greens. Let's see. Going back to the Viridian with the red. That's always a surefire. I use so much of that. And you have to lighten it to the value that you want, and then the color appears. Once you add that white, you can see what you have. Might be too green, just a tad of red to get it gray. Okay, so I'll put that in. There's a lot of little nuances. Here it warms up, but you don't really have to get all those in. You just kind of want to block in all these shapes. What's this guy doing? Okay, and then on my brush, I said, where else do I see this color? I could just throw it into this wave and work it as it goes up by adding, you know, some white and some yellow to that green. So you creep up on the color. Otherwise, you know, you put too much in like you saw me do many times. But I try to creep up on the color because that way you don't have to remix. Creep up on the color and the value. Oops. So again, think of it like the band, right? So now I'm going to add a lot more yellow to that, and then, whoops, white. And it's probably got a little bit of alizarin taking the green out of it, so it's got more warmth. This hopefully will do it. Let's see what it's going to do. That's not too bad. Nope, that's not enough. A little more white, a little bit more yellow. Always want to add just a nick of red to your green. Same thing when you're painting trees and things. So I mean, a lot of times too, you can also wipe out. Ah, look at that. Okay, then that just goes up into here somehow. Okay, the green's rolling over. That can be kind of fun. I think I have to go with a smaller brush. So I'll go with, I use flats, brights, and filberts. The brights are the ones that are square shape. Those are the workhorse of the brush because they're square. You can really block in I didn't use it today, I picked filbert, but the little short brights, if you're doing a big painting, those really work well. Okay, so this is a number 4 filbert.
Oh, wow. Okay, sure.
So first I'd like to put all these little threads going through. So I just took a little of the phthalo green and turquoise rather, and the viridian. So that's awful intense, so same thing, let's add a little bit of white. Looks like an electric green, that's kind of cool.
Wow.
Not wild, that's a phthalo. Kind of fun. Well, let me see what that's gonna do. Because again, you can always tone them down. Nope, that's a screamer. Go back to, the value's not too bad, it might be slightly dark, but again, I'm gonna paint over it, I'm gonna carve into it. So I always overpaint the shape, so I'm adding white, and then opposite on the color wheel, it's a little bit of the red. That's the CAD red light, and it's so invasive, sometimes I'll squiggle it over there. And then a little bit at a time, because it can be pretty rough. So now that's starting to gray down a little bit. Okay, so I can tell right from that I put too much turp in. You can see how it's almost dripping off. Like that's a no-no. So you just want to wipe off a spot like that. So this puddle just means I've got to start over with more pigment into it because I have way too much turp in there. Let's see if I can get it going again.
Would it be easier to work with a white palette instead of a color palette?
Not for me. I mean, there are some painters, oil painters, that do like to do that.
Mm.
But I would say that the general number of them, I think, tone a canvas first, but.
Yeah. No, I meant, you know.
Oh, you mean this?
I meant your, yeah.
No, because this is like a value 5, so that's in the middle of the value scale from a 1 meaning white and then a 9 meaning black. So if I know that that's roughly a 5, and also that gray matters stuff that I have here, that's a disposable palette paper that's Battleship Gray, value 5, right? So then I know everything to the right of a 5 is the light family, everything to the left is the shade family. It's the designation between the two, the shade and the light family. So if I have that color, and then I squint my eyes and I don't see my color, I know it's a 5, right? So the backs of these waves too, I always say that it's like pixels when you look at a photograph or something. It wouldn't be like this really, really bright minty green up against that dark, dark blue. It would be a darker transition step where the values are closer together so you won't see. Right, and then they start to go up and over. Still a little thin there. Alright, these guys start to go more straight down because the perspective, and they're going out, like down, and then they flay up in that direction as they get up to the horizon line. Right, so then you can go in with those pretty minty greens, and we can try a little bit of that phthalo and yellow, and that's electric. Wow. But that's pretty nice. Nice value, but it's too green, so again, we have to add just a little nick of red in there. Oops, not that much. Did it again. This stuff really kicks in the vibrancy fast.
Mm.
All right, we'll go back to the yellow to warm it up again. And see what happens with that one. So I'm taking the brush and I go this way, then the other side and that side, so your brush is pretty even consistency with that cooking oil color. I think it's got to be a little darker up at the top of that. I'll just go into the other green. Okay, then under here we go back to that pinky color. That brown that we made with blue and red. That's kind of tucked up into this area. It's just like a mauvey green, actually. It's a combination of both of those colors. Because it's in the shadows, so it starts to get neutralized where you can't see the color because it's hiding out. It's hiding out underneath that wave crest. Doing just a little bit more phthalo turquoise as we come out this way. So I'm going like in the direction of the waves with my hand. So you have to think of this too as a first pass, right? Because you're getting an averaging of all of these little tones and colors that are in there, but you're getting it all put in at this stage so that you can go and do all these little nuances later. I'm just trying to restate him because he was a little thin right up in here. Okay. It is so quiet in here.
Oh, mesmerized.
Oh my goodness. You can shout out questions as we go, you know, if you have any things you're wondering about or a bit more white. So I'll be adding a lot more of those little lines, you know, that are rolling down later, but I like to put a dark down or a darker color and then overpaint it like you carve in with a lighter color on top of it. A little of that, and then also I like to overpaint with the brush too, like use both of those techniques if you can. All right, so this foam underneath here, the way I like to, I'm going to make some room here because I'm going to be using lighter colors for that wave foam splash, and I don't want to have anything on there that can contaminate the white. So. It's amazing. I always think about paintings during the ugly duckling stage when you start, and then once you start getting things covered, all of a sudden it just starts to come out of nowhere, and you're like, oh my God, thank God. Okay, so a lot of times for clouds and for like the wave shadows, I'll take cerulean blue and a little alizarin crimson and white. I may need to tone it down. I have to look at these colors over here. They're darker at the base, right, because they're hiding in the shadows, and as they come up, they get lighter. And the light's up here, so a lot of times they're cooler on the left and then warmer on the right. But we'll just start. So it's like a nice silvery purple. See that color, how neutral it is? And it's like a little diamond shape. Kind of splashes in and overpaint the shape so you can go in there and carve into it. You're gonna have to go darker on the bottom. There's always like so many ways to skin the cat, because I could either jump over here and add white and alizarin, or I could go here and add blue to get, so you just have to make up a decision. I guess I'll go back with this little mother puddle, right? And I'll do the darker side. So to get the value darker, I'll just add a little more purple into there. And then to neutralize this purple, we have to add the yellow. And I'm gonna put a little more blue, so it's a more blue purple instead of an alizarin, and see if this color, a little bit of turf on there. So it goes right into here. I just kind of wiggle it right in there. I could even add a little more blue closer to the bottom. So again, you can put these accents in later, if you say, oh, I really need to do this bit of this darker blue. But, at least you get the general idea going. Those kids are having fun out there. It's the first nice day. So now I took that blue and added a little alizarin, and I'm going over to here. Where the water meets the foam. The water plane. And this starts to go on an angle more. And then this actually goes up like this in here and then back out. Okay, and now back to that foam color. So cerulean blue, alizarin crimson, and white. But I want this one to be more on the alizarin side because we're heading towards the light. So think of the color wheel, or a prism, or a rainbow. So, if you were more blue-purple, now we're more red-purple, right? So I just want to make sure the value is light enough. If it's too purpley, you can add just a nick of yellow ochre or yellow. That will neutralize it a little bit. Now they get really lighter on the edges of them. So I'm painting, like you can see all these little blue spots like through this wave. So I kind of paint what's behind it, and then I put the foam on top of it. And I have to go back and forth a few times, to get it right, but this color, I think, has a little more yellow in it. We'll go with that. Okay, so these waves here, I thought of them as like fans, there's one here, and there's one here, one here. So you can kind of paint the shadow of that fan, right? So again, it's that alizarin crimson and a little bit of cerulean blue. see what's gonna happen with that. Not much. It's gonna go really light. So I'm taking alizarin and a little yellow. Let's see if I can make a difference just to start getting a shape in on top of these fans. That's really alizarin down there. And then what I like to do is just go in the direction of the fan. So you could see that there's going to be, so there's one fan, and then the next one I'll add a little red, a little yellow. It's getting closer to the light and white because I want it to be cooler. So the white cools it down. I want that a little warmer. It's always a back and forth, and it's really just testing. You know, think about where the light's coming from. So there's this fan spraying off of this one. And then we can put the sparkles on the top later. There's a little bit of purple shadows going like in these fans. And then it gets cooler as it gets farther away, so you can add blue. If you don't put down these little half steps, you know, it looks like a value number 1 or maybe a 2. The foam will not show up, you know, so you really have to have these nice gray blues, and you have to set the stage to be able to put all of the, oops, that's not coming off the brush, that means you need more medium. I mean, heck, you could just go over that whole thing. Okay, up into here, we've got these little trails of strange grays. So, to make a gray, I always like to do my Viridian green and my red. It makes such a good battleship gray color. The stickies.
Baseball, yeah. Parking lot was big. I heard the cheerleaders out there too. Yeah.
Take the kids in and they're bad.
Right.
All right, so this is a neutral gray, so that's my transition step going up into that green that's above it. And it has these little eddies that just kind of roll into the green. And then you can easily put your light on top of that, but you have to have your little transitions there on the edges. So that is like between, that's what connects the value fields. So in a way, you can almost outline things. So there's only like little bits of white peeking through there, so I can just put this on nice and thin, and then later on I can dot those colors into it. Up here, I think it's maybe bluer because it's farther away, and it will recede in space more in front of that other gray if I just cool it down just a little bit. guys hanging in there? Am I boring you? Back to my audience here.
It's amazing to see how many different colors there are in the wave.
This little thing's got a bunch of white on it. So I could take some of those greens that we were using, foam shadows, and just get these neutral blue grays. When it's not coming off the brush, add more turp. If you already have paint down, you can go into liquid or one of the mediums. Let's go just a little bluer. So now I'm knitting in this green shape right here. It's gonna be covered with a lot of white foam, but there'll be a transition step. Go a little purple. All right, so I noticed that there's a lot of pure Viridian with white, right where that foam is going to meet the green part of the barrel of the wave. So this is just Viridian and white. Down in here. So what that does is you get the barrel, because you want this to look like a cylinder, right? So to get that to look like a cylinder, it's got the warmest part here because the sun's back here, and then it's going to be a little darker and cooler in here. Right, so you have to try to get that form to turn. So I feather in just a little bit of this Viridian into these other parts. Okay, while that's setting up, we'll just start getting in some of this foam. So this is kind of a crazy fun part. It's a lot of gray, and I'm really painting the ocean floor. So I'll go with that same mixture of gray, the green, boy do I use a lot of Viridian, and the red. And I always do that. I always add too much red. Glad I have that phthalo now because that can quickly get you back. So it's the same concept that you have to paint the floor of the ocean, before you can get all those lights to go on top of it. This is probably really dark, so I want to get the value up. So I'm adding white. So I have a neutral gray here. Okay, that's got to be lighter. So I'm taking this gray and I'm threading it between the color blocks so they kind of knit together. The lines would be closer together in the back, and then they'll be farther apart as you get like in here. And that's because of linear aerial perspective. So there's definitely not white way back in here. It's just like a gray. That's got to be worked on. You can move your arm like a figure eight, you know, to kind of rock it. As it comes forward, it gets really taupey. So we'll go with yellow and red and purple. I want the value a little darker, you have to add purple. That's like a number 9 value. And there's paint in the ferrule in this brush because it was loaded with other colors. So, you know, you have to really get that mixed up. All right, then we'll get lighter as we come forward. I'm going to add yellow to that because when you add white, the color cools down. And I want yellows come forward. So we'll just warm that up a little bit. So I overpaint the shapes. Okay, now we're getting into greens up in this area. So I'm trying to just get a little paint off the brush. I could always switch to another brush, but it's doing the job okay so far, so. So Viridian green. I ran out of yellow ochre, I have it over there, but I'll just add raw sienna because that's pretty similar. It's just really windy. There's like this little circle up in the middle here. It's kind of an interesting shape, so I just kind of went with that. And then there's some blue greens there. A little darker. So up in the foreground, if you use larger strokes, it gives you perspective. If these are smaller and tighter together, then you can use big bold strokes in the front. It can bring it forward. It can give you a lot of depth. So I think now I'm going to start putting in some gray and white. And then I can lay in the foam on top. Let's see, time-wise. Okay. Unless you're all falling asleep.
Well, actually, I'm just wondering, when you're gonna do the foam, because I've seen it done both ways, are you gonna do the foam on the, sort of do it on the palette and then bring it across, or are you gonna mix it wet on wet?
Both. I'm going to mix it on the palette and then put it on wet paint.
Okay,
Yep.
yep.
So again, I'm starting with that neutral gray, and it's just got to be a lot lighter in this case. Because we're going to be putting like white foam on top. So you can make almost like a sluice, you know. I used to always take a little liquid or a little medium and make a real sloppy, sluicy mess, and it's kind of fun to put on. But if I, put the medium in now too, then you could have trouble. You could have trouble where the paint's too thick, right? Because then you won't be able to put thicker paint on top of that. It will just slide around. So I have to kind of blend in some of these little footprints, if you want to call them. So you can just drag wet paint on top of that. Tickle the edges up and down if you want. That's a nice motion to switch from all the horizontalness a lot of times, but I think for the most part I'll go, you know, what's the word here, horizontal. And then later when I'm starting to put finishing touches on, then I can take my brushes and start doing other techniques so that it's more interesting and to counteract. So here I just want to put this on kind of dry, right, because then it'd be much easier to put our white on top. If I wanted to, I can make that a little warmer on the right side because we're closer to the sun on this side. So we can warm that up just a little bit. Okay. Alright, so it's always good to stand back. So yeah, the blocking's coming along okay. I think I'll go ahead and put some of the spray in before and let that set for a little while. To cover up some of that yellow so that it's not showing through too much. Okay, so a smaller brush for the wave foam. So what you can do is make a spectrum of whites. So you start off with purple whites, and then it can have more alizarin, then more red, and more yellow and white into the white. I'll start off with a bunch of white. So we'll go with just a little bit of the purple. Maybe a little alizarin. Can't really see it, but that's like a purple white, and this is a alizarin white. And then over here, you can leave your brush loaded. You can just add a little yellow. And just those three whites are fine. So I'll start with the cooler one. Try a little liquid on there. That's great. More alizarin in there, just look a little too cold. So you can kind of just pump it in like that. My brush is pretty loaded with thick paint. It gets really close, more alizarin when it gets to the base, like right in here. So my edges are pretty stiff right now, but you can manipulate that paint. Like, you know, sculpt it, so to say. See if I can get some yellow on top of this here. I'm just trying to get a little deeper tone when it's closer to the bottom. Let's see, but not quite that bright. Oh my goodness. Then I can take Viridian and white. So again, it's really light. It's just tinted. It's a tint of it. And that I can splash up into here. Purples too look really good when you do that. So see how you just roll your hand down to integrate this foam color into the barrel? Because that's all going right where they were. So, up here it's very grapey with a little blue in there. I'm taking purple and cerulean into the white. But it has to be much whiter than that, because that didn't show up. So I try to scumble and leave some of the paint that's underneath it showing through. It's always nice if you can get away with it. I'm putting thicker paint on, but I really need a transition step between, so I have to go back with that ugly gray. So, as usual, it's the Viridian and red. And green. What I'm trying to do is behind this wave, there's a barrel that's going down like this in the back, but it's super light. So I'm adding more white and more yellow and trying to get it to where I want it. There's a real nondescript color here. It's really neutralized gray, so it's like rolling down and over.
Jackie, as you're putting on the finishing touches there, just want to make a quick announcement that Pat Klein cut some mats and she's got some extra scraps. So if you want to use them for color samples or whatever you need on your way out, if you'd like to grab some, help yourself.
Okay, it looks like, I need to add a lot more wave on the top, because right up it goes into here, it's almost aerated water. So I'm gonna see if I can get that aerated water up there. So this is the sort of thing that, you have to just, you're manipulating wet paint, so you have to try to get softer edges. If you have real thick paint in this area, you can leave it alone, but you have to take the edges and blend them in. So it's kind of nice to have a little texture in your oil paintings if you can help it. You can certainly go back in and jazz those up more, but at least if you get a start. It's basically softening things up. That's too white. Just want to have the eye follow those dots, up in that Z pattern. And stagger these guys. All right, I didn't put, when the ocean wave rises up behind a breaker, the one that's coming behind it, I was saying that it's pretty dark up here, but then down here, the plane starts to get flatter. So then you're getting the sky in there. So a lot of times you'll see crazy colors in there, in that barrel, because depends on what light is in the sky. I've seen reds and mauves and fun stuff like that.
I never really knew the anatomy of a wave. You're describing so many different parts and pieces of, I mean, a barrel maybe I knew from maybe surfing or something,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there's just such an anatomy
There's
of a
another
wave.
thing too, when a wave crashes and the wind is whipping through on a windy day, there's spin drift coming up and you'll see it spinning off. It's like this little foam trail, so a lot of those hotels are called spin drift.
That's,
You know,
I
I just
never
learned
knew.
that last year. It's pretty cool.
It is.
Thing. Yeah. Way. Two. Yeah. So I'm just going in with that phthalo and red. Maybe more cerulean wise. So this is a shovel load. When you have like super thick paint, you just go wham and plow it in. It's really fun. Kind of following that same horizontal going across. I kind of went down into that wave to connect the two, right? It's really a lot of fun. I hope you guys try it. Yeah. Yeah, so if I have that color in the middle, I have to integrate it back into what was around it. So I could put some of that ultramarine blue in it. And then just see that now there's a deeper color here. So, I mean, there's still a lot to do. This I can lay in some quick foam pattern to show you, but these straight lacings I haven't done, so I kind of feel like I want to show you those too, but they're no time-wise.
Are there different phases you have to wait for this to dry to a certain point before you can add in, or you just continue?
Nope. So you can do alla prima as in one sitting, right, all at once. So you certainly can, but you have to have your paint thin enough underneath. Because if you have it too thick, then it's just like painting into gushy mud, and then you have a problem. You have to scrape it off, you know, and then do another passage. But once you get that technique of the thinner oil paint, you're fine, and just layering. So it's really like a layering effect. I mean, there are painters that paint, what is it called, direct color. So every little patch is the exact color, boom, they leave it. And I used to try it in art school with still lifes, and
If you get the chance, go see Russ Kramer, who does, he does waves that way.
Oh, he
Yeah.
does, yeah, I
Oh, yeah,
believe it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he's down in Mystic, so you
Yeah,
can drop
he's
in on him.
amazing. You can drop in the studio. So for the water in the back, I'll use this small brush. I would still, you know, jazz up this water more, but I don't want to spend 20 minutes on that. I can go on to this. So, you know, again, it's that ugly gray, green, viridian, and red. If I use purple and yellow, it's just a little too warm. I'd rather use that for sand on a beach, you know, like a taupe brown. And then the other one is the blue and the red. That's more of a chocolatey brown gray. So this one is really pretty nice. So now I make that flusy thing with liquid and turf. And again, this is a gray, because it can't be pure white or it's going to come popping out of the distance. just use your finger. If you get too thick, that works. I find if I make really thick lines with tree branches and things, I just go back and carve them out. Or I use this shaper tool. This is a really cool tool for scribing, and you can do sgraffito on things like that, right? Or you could sign your name, with that too. So, or you could kind of shape lines. But so I have to go a little grayer for the back because I can see that that was just popping out too much. Let's see if this will show up. Come on, baby. So I'm just really making this sluicy thing, and just the brush is just loaded. And then I just try to go through and rock. So I kind of use my shoulder swinging like that. You have to load your brush again. Then you can take a big bold stroke. I mean, that wasn't quite where I wanted it, but you're going to have to go with it if you do something obnoxious like I just did. So, you just integrate. You have to knit that shape in is all you have to do. Try to leave the mark in the middle so they can see the brush hairs, and then just tickle the edges. So when I come forward, I have to get really light. So, but back here, it's really grayed out. I think there was a little blue in that section. All right, so then I would go bigger brushes. Man, is that fun to do that. Because you could see like all the medium in the paint is glossy compared to the turf, because the turf is so dull and thin. It's really fun when you get to this stuff. I'm putting a lot of medium into there. Sometimes there's like a little, not a figure eight, but a little Z. I need more white. I'll use warm white, and then I won't have to do anything to it. This white is a little obnoxious. I probably, actually it's not that bad. Once the things that are around it kind of mix in with it, it takes all of the intensity out of it. I hate it when I cover up too much of that beautiful green, because it's a really nice transition to be underneath. But so these need transition steps too. You can see how they look really weird. So you have to get a blue-gray. So if I went with ultramarine blue and a little bit of red. So there's like a little bit of a transition of I could even put a little, I would say there's a little browner or something into it, but I don't have the brown mixed up. So these are just transition steps that are a grayer color that's be like the pixels in a photograph that you would see in between all those colors of things. I can stop anytime. I know you guys probably want to get home, right? Because I can keep going, you know?
I think we're pretty close to the end.
Yeah, because I'm gonna have to clean up and all too, so. But, well, I hope I was able to give you some techniques.
Thank you.